Well, I mean, I do need to bring this up. It's one of the most famous things that involves you is the Dynamite Kid incident, and that stems from something that happened to you before, the actual fight that people always talk about. Can you tell us what had happened before with you and Dynamite that led to you sort of having to stand up for yourself?
I think it all led. I think it all led that there was a couple of things that was. Now that I look back, because I have this greatest respect for the British Bulldogs that we knew when we came in the business. We were looking up, me and Raymond, to the British Bulldogs, like, wow, this is the team, man. This is the team. It was the best thing we've seen in tag team. Uh, and we got to Madison Square Garden. I think it all started then. We got to Madison Square Garden, and we were sitting down with Vince, and the Bulldogs were there. Me and Raymond, and he looked at all four of us. He says, "Listen, tonight." And we're talking about the most prestigious place in the world, the Madison Square Garden. And he says, "Tonight," he says, "I want you guys to have a Broadway match, like no winners." And I looked at my brother Raymond very discreetly, and I was like, "Yes, like yes, these guys are the world tag team champions, and they're not beating us. Like this is gives us a lot of credibility." But at the same time, that I was going like, "Yes," they were probably going like, "What the fuck?" You know, like these two jabronis here. How come we're not beating them? So that put a little bit of heat instantly between us, because then they felt like being champions, that their position was threatened, and so that put a little heat there, and from then on, well, I look at I've never been a I've never been a guy who there's no gray zone in my life. It's always black and white. Uh, I don't know how to explain that more than I always say it this way now. Like, you have normal people here, and you have autistic people here. I'm probably in between there somewhere, but I'm not all there. And so there's so many things that my dad tried to teach me when I was young. I didn't listen to him, like about diplomacy, about you can't always say the truth, you can't always speak the truth, you got to turn your tongue 7 times before you talk. And I've never been that kind of guy. What's on my mind is on my tongue. What's on my tongue, you're going to get it. If I like you, I like you, you'll know it. If I don't like you, I'll tell you. And so I was that kind of person. And I think that that didn't go well with some people, because I spoke my mind. And uh and I think that Dynamite had uh, a small man complex. Like, he was such a great athlete. He had everything going for him, but in his mind, since he was short and since he wasn't big, I think he always had to try to prove. He always had to prove in the dressing room. And he was proving it in ways that are more or less popular by some people, like being a bully a bit, like, just playing jokes on people, but playing jokes and ribs, like we call in the dressing room, that it's okay to. There was two kinds of jokes when I was in the business. There was Owen Hart, who would make everybody laugh. He'd play jokes on people, but everybody would laugh. And Dynamite and Davy Boy, they were playing jokes that would make people laugh, but they were hurt to people that they were playing the jokes on. And when they started playing those jokes, and they finally decided, because of the attitude, the conflict between me and him, personality conflict, me being outgoing and expressing myself sometimes in ways that maybe not everybody liked. So he decided to take the reign there and started to play with my stuff and my gear. And when I realized that was happening, I went and I told Mr. Perfect. I said, "Hey," I said, "do you mind checking my gear? I'm going in the ring tonight." And I said, "Just check my gear to tell me if anybody plays with my gear." And when I came back from the ring, Kurt Hennig looked at me, and he went like this. He looked at me and he went like, and he looked at my bag, and he looked at me, my bag, my. I said, "Oh shit!" I said, "So they played a bad joke on me," and so I just told Kurt Hennig, just like that, out of spontaneous. I just told him. I said, "I'm not gonna stand for this." I said, "Monday when I see Vince, I'm gonna tell him. I don't need this. I don't need this. I'm on the road 25 days a month. I don't need to come out with my pants cut off, or I don't need to. I don't need this. It's too hard on the road. I don't need it. And not knowing that Mr. Perfect turned around and he went to see the Bulldog when I left the building, and he said, "Hey," he said, "Jacques is gonna stooge on you. Jacques is gonna." So when we went home for 3 days, we're going home for those 3 days. So when I came back after the 3 days, I was in Miami. First night, my dad was there. My dad's a snowbird, so I haven't seen him in a long time. So we flew into Fort Lauderdale. My dad picks me up, brings me to the show with Raymond, and we get to the building. And as I'm getting at the building, I go in the dressing room. Mr. Perfect sitting at the end of the dressing room in the corner with a table in front of him with the cards on the table, because he knew we liked to play cards all the time. Some guys played cards. And as soon as I walked in the dressing room, he says, "Hey, Jacques, come play cards." So, okay. So I put my bag down. I knew it was on last with or just about on last with the Heart Foundation. So we got plenty of time to kill. So I go sit, but the way he was sitting, like he went so much in the corner of the building that my back was to the dressing room. So I started playing cards, and then the next thing you know, the 6 of them came in. The Bulldogs came in, Brett, Anvil, Morocco, and Orton. All 6 of them together came in, and from behind, just Dynamite came, and he just like he slapped me on the side of the head, and I had my cards in my hands like this, and I fell off the chair, and like holy shit, and I was, and he just. I was so dizzy, and I got back up. I'm not gonna say the words I said, like what the, and I turned around, and then he punched me in the mouth, and he started punching me a couple of times, and and then he says, "You want to stooge on me, huh?" He says, "You're gonna tell the boss. You're gonna stooge." And he just, I was so surprised, and I don't have the instinct of a fighter. I'm not a fighter. I'm not a street fighter. I'm an entertainer, and so I took a big beating. I ended up being on the floor, and he kicked me in the face, and that stayed there. So then, so many little things happened in the next week until I was going in the dressing room night after night, and they thought I would quit the business, but I didn't. I still kept on walking every night, going and work. I was swollen like the hunchback of Notre Dame, but in my face. I was really messed up. And night after night, they'd come in the dressing room, and they'd come bang his suitcase around me like, "Oh, book," and really loud and obnoxious. And after 3 nights, I couldn't take it anymore. I didn't want to be seen as the McFly like in Back to the Future. I couldn't. I had too much respect for the Rougeau name and for myself, but I was in a daze. I was like really traumatized. And so finally, after the third day, it's funny because I was traveling with Raymond. We were going from town to town, and I didn't speak to my brother for 3 days. I was sharing a room with him, the car with him, the airplanes, everything. I didn't speak to him, not one word. I was like, I was gone. And then after the third night, being laughed at and ridiculed in front of all the boys, I just told my brother after going back to the hotel, I said, Mondays in 4 days from now, it's TV. I said, I'm going to do my comeback. And then my brother was so happy because my brother's a fighter. My brother Raymond, he's a tough guy. And so is my dad. You know, it's in their genes. They're really, and so they were proud. Raymond was real proud. So then when came the next Monday, we, without going into all the details, I remember just calling my father the Sunday night because my father was there when I got beat up the week before when I was in Miami, and he saw me, and I never spoke to him after the beating. I got in the car, never spoke to him. He brought me to the airport next day. I never spoke to him, not one word, but I was really beat up bad, and I knew my father must have been hurting so bad. So the week after, which was the Sunday night, I called my dad up the day before I was going to do my comeback, and I said, Dad, he says, Jacques? I said, yeah. I said, I just want to let you know. I said, tomorrow I'm going to do my comeback, but I could hardly speak. My mouth was really messed up. And the only thing my dad told me, he says, before you go to the show, he says, go to the bank. And he says, get yourself a roll of quarters. And he says, when you hit him, he says, you hit him to kill him. So my dad told me, and I'm not a fighter here, so it's like, oh my God, okay. I was already nervous that I had to do the comeback. You know, for 3-4 days, I've been thinking about it. What if I miss him? What if I miss? You know, I'm thinking about all those things for 3-4 days, and then finally the next day, I went in and I waited till they go eat to the cafeteria, the morning. And then when he came out of the cafeteria, I was standing in the hallway, and I just waited, and then I sucker punched him, and I just caught him right, and I busted all his teeth out of his mouth, and I did what I had to do. I just took up for myself. I just wanted this to stop, and it was funny because if you'd asked me to do this again today, I could never do it. And I wonder how I did it then. It's probably because I didn't want to lose my job. I didn't life for me was wrestling, and it was my big dream, and I had no reasons to lose my big dream because I was being bullied by this guy who
And do you think if you hadn't have fought back in that way, that the respect level from people in wrestling would have?
it was already gone. For the 3 days that I followed that, no one was talking to me. Not one of the boys in the dressing room talked to me. Because they didn't want to be seen talking to me in case the Bulldogs thought, "Oh yeah, you're friends with Jacques, yeah, so you're next on the list." So nobody talked to me. I already lost the respect by everybody. I felt it, and but it was more the self-esteem for myself. I couldn't look at myself in the mirror. I couldn't even shave in the mirror. I was embarrassed to look at myself. Like, how could you be bullied like this and not do nothing? Like, it was painful. It was really painful, more mentally than physically. The physical, I took some bad shots in my life, but not mentally like that. Being discriminated, being embarrassed or insulted, or put all the words you could imagine together, and but it changed my life because when that happened, 99% of the boys thought I was gonna go home and quit the business, but I kept showing up night after night, and they kept bullying me more and more, and so when I did that, it changed my whole life because after that, 2 weeks later, they quit the business. They quit the business, and then he ended up having problems over drugs, and major things happened to him. They split up, him and Davey. He ended up in a wheelchair, and he ended up beating his wife. He ended up doing so many things that are horrible, that I messed up his life the way he tried to mess up mine. But I just do it to defend myself. I didn't do it out of malice. I just do it what I had to do. But then by doing that, taking the year off after that, then coming back as a Mountie, winning the Intercontinental Championship. After that, becoming the Quebecers, winning 3 times the WWF Tag Team Champions. After that, going to Montreal and being the only Canadian to ever beat Hulk Hogan and getting a pinfall. My life changed dramatically because I stood up for myself. But the greatest thing that happened at all that for me in my life is after that moment when that happened, for the next 25 years, I can't tell you how many schools. I must have went in about 100 schools to talk to 5, 6, 7, 800 kids at the same time against bullying and showing them how to beat bullying without using violence, just by being together, by sticking each other together. Like I have so many tricks that I put together in my mind how to stop bullying, and so I made a great name out of myself in my province for being a savior for bullying, and
I
so,
was going to ask you because you said that the Bulldogs left maybe 2 weeks after that incident.
yeah.
Was there any part of you that thought that Dynamite was going to try and retaliate on you?
Absolutely, 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 and I knew that he was going to do it. I knew he was going to do it because he had to save face. Because Dynamite Kid was he had become the bully that's like in a jail movie, and like in a movie when it spends in jail, there's always one or two guys that run the prison, like and he had become that guy. So I just knocked that guy off his throne, so I knew there was going to be a comeback, but I found a way to stop that, and I'll never forget that. I'll never forget that. It's there's some key moments in your life that you never forget, and I'm going to share that with you because it's absolutely amazing. Um, I don't know where it came from, but I had this crazy idea the next night. Um, Dino Bravo, who was a French Canadian, but was also close to the Bulldogs, and he wouldn't even speak to me the day after my beating. Dino Bravo, he was a French Canadian from my home, and he never wanted to speak to me. And when we got this, as a matter of fact, when I got to do my comeback the week later, I got in the arena at Fort Wayne, Indiana. When we got at the arena with my roll of quarters in my pocket, Dino Bravo was sitting between the Bulldogs, and he was telling them this. they were sharing the story because Dino wasn't with us on the tour. There was 3 tours a night that in those days, 3 towns every night, so we weren't together. But when we got together for TV days, and that was a TV day where everybody was there. Hulk was there, Vince was there, everybody was there. So that's when I decided to do my comeback to make a statement. And so Dynamite and Bull and Davey Boy are sitting with Dino sitting between them. And I walk in the dressing room. It's the first time Dino's seen me in a week. And I walk in, and as I walk in, I say, "How you doing, Dino?" He never even said hello to me when he was sitting with him. So long story short, is when I did my damage, after that, Vince McMahon told us to leave. We never did the show that night when I did that comeback at noon. He sent us to the next town in Madison Square Garden because the Bulldogs were going back to Europe that night. They were flying overseas to come back here. And he says they're not going to be at TV. So he says, guys, so Vince brought us, me and Raymond, to the car. He brought us, he escorted us because he was afraid of, and not knowing that the Bulldogs were already gone to the hospital. So Vince just was afraid that some other boys would have just came and defended them or whatever. So he brought us to the car and he says, go to Madison Square Garden. We'll see you tomorrow. The Bulldogs won't be there. So so when we got to the Madison Square Garden the next day, there's 3 dressing rooms. And when we came in, we took the first dressing room. And during the evening, all the boys that came in, they all took the other 2 dressing rooms. The only 2 that was in the dressing room was me and Raymond, and one of them, nobody wanted to be seen in the same dressing room as me because everybody knew there'd be retaliation, and they didn't want to be seen with us, except Dino walks in. And when Dino comes up to me, I swear to God, I don't know where it came from. I took a piece of paper and I wrote down a name, a fake name, not even a real name, and a phone number. And because I knew Dino had sat down that morning, the day before, and he never said hello to me anymore, that he'd already switched camp. Like, he wasn't going to, I knew now that where he stood. So he came in just to tell Raymond, because Raymond, like I said, Raymond's a fighter, and Dino respected Raymond a lot as a fighter, a tough guy. So he didn't want to get on Raymond's backside. So he came in the dressing room that night at the Gardens the next night, and he said to Raymond, he says, I got good news and bad news. He said, which one do you want first? So Raymond says, give me the good news. He says, the Bulldogs gave their notice. They're leaving, they're quitting. And I was on the other side of the bench, and I was going like, yes, yes. I couldn't believe it. Like, this was like incredible. And then so Raymond says, okay. So he says, what's the bad news? Well, I said, the Bulldogs gave their notice. And then I stopped to think for a second. Holy shit. That means that they're not going to leave without making a comeback. That's like the bad part. They're leaving in 2 weeks. So the next 2 weeks, they're going to prepare something big to lose their job but save face. And I knew it was coming. And so that's when I took a piece of paper and I took a number and I just wrote a number down, and it came out of nowhere. It's almost like a movie stunt. And I put that down, and then I went to see Dino, who didn't want to talk to me today and the next day, the day before. And now he wanted to talk to me because I did my comeback. So he had more respect for me. I'd gained respect right there with Dino. So I said, Dino, I said, can I share something with you? And he says, yeah. I turned the piece of paper over. I showed him the number and the fake name and the number. And I said, you see this? I said, for the next 2 weeks, I said, I got to call this number every night. I said, if something happens to me in the next 2 weeks, I said, you got to swear to me you're not going to tell this to anybody. You got to swear to me, Dino. And I knew what I was doing. I was just planting a seed because I knew he'd run to him and tell him. And so it was all set up like a movie stunt. And I said, if ever something happens to me in the next 2 weeks, I said, they're going to have some visit in Calgary. The whole family. And Dino ran. And he ran and he told them, just like I thought. So the next 2 weeks, I never got touched. And that's what messed up Dynamite in his mind. It's because he was going to certainly kill me or do something or put me in a wheelchair or something. But because of that, he was probably protecting his family, his wife, his kids, where he thought it was a lot worse because Dino Bravo was known to be in the mafia. Not us. But since we were friends and he put everybody in the same boat, he thought it was probably a hit on his family. Something happened to me. And it was just something I put on a piece of paper. I thought of something because I was afraid. I honestly was afraid of what was coming, to be honest with you, because I knew Dynamite was going to put me in a wheelchair or finish me off somehow, just to save face.